What is reality? Reality is what we believe to be true about the nature of our surroundings. But how do we come to decide that true nature? Do we conceive it completely on our own? Or do other devices gently sway our thoughts onto a pre-decided path? This is the hard question we must all ask ourselves as free humans on this planet. New skulls swirl reality.
Reality. Hey guys, Wednesday night, what's happening?
What's good, everybody? It's Wednesday night, and it's time for your
Reality Brief. I'm Don.
I'm Dan.
We are the host of this show. Someone recently told us that we should introduce ourselves for people who don't know who we are. But I just figured that if you're watching this, you already know who we are.
Look, if you're new to the show, hey, that's who we are. This is our circus and our monkeys.
So tonight we've got some guests. We've got two guests, actually. First is Cael. They're going to be on together, actually, but Cael has his first time come forward with a story, and it's going to be pretty interesting. So he's an officer in the Nacht Waffen. and then, of course, the super secret mystery guest is Miss Bradley. So, hey, guys, how's it going?
Hey, guys.
You there? Cael, you there?
Hello.
Hey,
welcome
Can
back.
you hear me for one? Is it actually working?
it's working.
It's working,
We
yes.
apologize, guys, for the late start, but we were having some
We were
difficulties
finally
there.
able to activate the machine.
We haven't quite gotten the quantum telecommunications down yet, so it's a little touch and go here and there. Oh, hey, and that number, don't call it.
Yeah, it's busy right now.
It's busy right now.
If you do have questions, we are taking those to the YouTube chat.
Yeah, so throughout the night, if you get questions, just throw them up there. We'll see them. So anyway, oh, man, I don't even know where to start. I mean, I guess we could start with Cael.
Maybe a little bit of backstory on what Nacht Waffen
Where does it
is
start,
for-
man? Where does it start? Where in your childhood? What's the first thing that kind of tipped you off to, hey, something's not right here?
Well, look, from the beginning, as early as I can remember, I knew that something wasn't right, and yet at the same time, I also knew that well, I didn't really know that anything was abnormal. In fact, I just assumed, because I thought I was a perfectly normal individual, that everything that I was experiencing was normal, and that every kid had these sorts of things. You know, the weird dreams and you know, just knowing things, you know. And it really used to confuse me when I talked to other kids, and they did not, you know, they didn't understand what I was talking about, or they couldn't empathize with me. They, you know, for a long time I assumed maybe that they were like that. Maybe I was like substantially more intelligent than they were. You know, that you know, I used to say to them, "Don't you just know this?" You know, and they would just look at me like there was something wrong with me. Which, now I look back on it, perhaps there was. You know, my earliest memory was, yeah, I should probably start from the beginning. So my earliest memory was when I was about 3. I woke up for no particular reason. My light was on in my bedroom at that point in time, as I was scared to death of the dark, terrified, in fact. So I used to demand that my parents left my light on. So my light was on, and for some reason I decided I was going to go have a shower, which was unusual because I didn't used to have showers at that point in time. I recall getting out of bed in the light, walking down to the bathroom, standing in front of the shower. Then there's some missing time. I don't know what happened, but I'm now naked and wet, like I've had a shower. And I think to myself, oh, I've had a shower. And I walk out of the bathroom and into my bedroom, still wet, you know. And now the light is off in my bedroom. And at that point in time, I wouldn't have entered my bedroom if the light was off. I was that scared of it. But for some reason, I wasn't afraid. And I walked into the bedroom, and floating over my bed was a semi-luminous, very thin female figure. At that particular point in time, the only word I had for her was a ghost. And she smiled at me. Mm-hmm.
You said semi-luminous. Was
Yeah,
it like transparent? Was it translucent? Did it seem solid? Could you touch it?
She was quite solid, but the glowing area volume around her was transparent. She glowed like a blue color. I think maybe she was illuminated by the glowing volume around her, so she appeared to be slightly blue. And it was lighting up my room just a little bit, enough I could see fine. And it was like she was laying on my bed, but floating about 1.5 feet above it.
So is she just like normal, like human? Or did she, any distinguishing features and like non-human looking features?
She was very thin. She was quite long, quite tall, I should say. But by my standards now, she was a pretty normal looking, normal height for a human being. To be honest, I really struggle remembering faces for some reason. It's like they're blocked out deliberately. And that particular individual, who I now have let's say a working relationship with, I still struggle to remember her face. So I can't really tell you a lot about what her face looks like. But I can tell you she's over 6 foot tall and very, very thin. Hang on, I'm just going to try and... Can you hear me still?
Yeah.
Yeah, we can hear you just fine.
Yeah, definitely.
I'm just I'm trying to get rid of some of the noise on my end.
Everything is going haywire at the moment. I can't believe how much everything's falling apart over here. Anyway, okay, so yeah,
that's pretty normal in these interviews.
Especially on ours.
Yeah, I can't believe it. Yeah.
Everything works perfect until it's time for the interview.
Yeah, I mean, like, there's always the Murphy's, what is it, Murphy's Law, where everything, if it will go wrong, it can go wrong. But I checked and double-checked everything beforehand to make sure everything works. And, yeah, it's amazing. Everything just stopped working. But anyway, so back onto what we were talking about. So that was my first experience when I was about 3. And she was very... she smiled at me. She tapped on the bed. I crawled in underneath her and laid on the bed. I was very calm and relaxed in her presence. I closed my eyes and pulled my sheets up over myself, as you would, laying underneath a 6 foot tall skeletal ghost. But I was very
She's not going to like you describing her that way. She's not going to like that at all.
I think she understands. Yeah, and then suddenly when I closed my eyes, the calm and fearlessness disappeared, and I'm terrified. I remember I could see a very bright light through my eyelids. And I saw a very fast movement, and she was gone. And the terror hit me at that point in time. And I mean, I wasn't scared. I wasn't terrified. It was beyond that. It was like soul-destroying terror. Nothing like, I just can't explain it. It was the most insane terror. And from that point onwards, I recall I had many years of sleepless nights. I would put 6 or 7 or 8 blankets on my bed, even in the middle of summer, just to hide my figure under the blankets. And I would sleep all the way down under the blankets, like down at the bottom of my bed, so that if somebody came into my room, they would think nobody was in my bed. This is, I now look back on this and realize these are not normal thoughts of a 3-year-old.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it's, so, you know, things weren't always normal. When I was a little bit older, when I was in grade 1 and I was going to school, I remember looking at my reflection in the window and thinking to myself how much I hated this body. It was slow, it was fat, my eyes were too close together, they were small like a monkey. You know, my skin was all...
Do you still feel that way? You still think you got
No,
I
I didn't. I didn't like my body when I was a kid. But, sorry?
Right. No, he's just being a smartass. Continue, please.
Yeah, that was legit.
Oh, okay. So, you know, like I knew, you know, at that point in time, I thought that was normal as well. And, you know, you don't question these things. You just assume as you grow up that you're a normal individual.
Yeah, I mean, why would you?
Exactly. You've got no other basis to compare it with. You know? So, you know, as time went on, I mean, like over those years, over my prepubescent years, I did not like my body. I wasn't happy with it. It really irritated me a lot. It makes sense now, you know, once you take into account that, you know, souls, you know, that if you were something else before you were human, before you were born, then, you know, makes a lot of sense. But anyway, so that's my childhood. When I was in about grade 4, when I was in grade 1, they did I got called up to the office at my school. Now, remember, this is in the middle of the Cold War, and they were doing a lot of strange things at that point in time. They called me up to the office, and I was to do a IQ test, which I thought was pretty cool, because obviously it meant that I must be intelligent or something. So they called me up to the office, and there was this lady who took me into the sick bay, and we spent the next couple of hours looking at all these different diagrams and memory tests, and I think there were even ink blot tests, for goodness sake. And at the end of it, she just said, "Okay, we're done now," and started packing up and said, "You can go back to your class now." And it was kind of anticlimactic. I was expecting some kind of results.
I had that similar experience from 1st grade through 8th. Every year, they would pull me and about 6 other kids out of school into the principal's office, and we would be given these tests with the different shaped blocks and everything. And we would be tested over the course of a week, and then we would be sent back to class like nothing had ever happened. And we moved about every 6 months, so these people had to work hard to keep up with where I was.
Well, at the end of the exam, I said to the lady, I said, you know, I mean, I was in grade 1, I was only a little kid, and I said to her, "So, am I intelligent?" And she kind of stopped and looked at me as if she didn't, she was like, "What?" And I said, am I intelligent? Did I pass? And she said, Oh, no, you're not very intelligent. Don't worry about it. Go back to class. And I'm
You
like,
adult.
Oh.
Well, you shouldn't have looked at her and said, "We am smarty."
So I thought, oh, okay, I mustn't be very intelligent then. So I went back to class. Things kind of cruised along, you know, for the next couple of years, just trying to cope with early primary school and whatnot, or elementary school, as you guys would call it. Then in grade 4, things took a significant shift, a very significant shift. Now, there was an incident where I wound up inside of a hangar. I don't
Inside of a
know
what? A
where I
hangar?
wound it up inside.
I'm sorry.
A hangar, yeah, like an aircraft hangar.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it was empty, but it was huge. Like it was massive, but it was just empty except for one corner where they had like something like a dentist chair and some very medical looking equipment. There was some guys in like white lab coats types of like typical scientific looking tech dudes, and a guy in a U.S. military uniform. And the guy in the U.S. military uniform was. Sorry?
Do you remember what branch? Like if he looked more
No
like Air
way.
Force or more like Navy?
What can you just describe the uniform, like colors, elements?
Sure. Well, it was green. It had lots of shiny buttons. He had service ribbons. He wore a normal military peaked hat. Just like a generic officer's.
G.I. Joe.
He was definitely U.S. though. The guy, the badge at the front, I recognized was had the U.S. insignia and whatnot on it. So he was, and he also spoke with an American accent. And he said, yeah, and he was like, I was strapped down to this dentist chair, like I couldn't move, and they were giving me needles. Many needles, and he was yelling at them like he was really pissed off. And I remember distinctly he said something like how could you lose him for 4 years? Like if you want something done right, do it yourself. Basically he just spent the entire time venting his spleen to these two poor tech dudes. But they were giving me needles while they were doing this. Like big needles, and one of them I remember he put in my neck underneath my jaw, and it felt like it went like right up underneath my jaw. It was very, very painful. Yeah, it's still strange, very strange experience, but after if it's something that I can't explain, I used to decide it was just a dream and that was the end of it.
Right.
If it could be within my realm of normality, then I would just assume that it was just normal and that all kids experience things like this. And that would be the end of it. So I just explained stuff away, and I did that for years. Then immediately after that, my parents were told that I needed to go see a therapist and that the school would arrange for one. I asked my mum why it was I needed to see a therapist, and she said, "Oh, just to help you play with the other kids." So I thought, "Oh, okay, fine." Obviously, I need to see a therapist to play with other kids. I didn't really felt like I need to, but what the hell. Anyway, so she starts taking me to this office, which had been set up in it looked like a rental house, to be honest, like somebody's rental house. And in this one room, I would go in and I would see this lady, and I assumed that she would do what psychologists do and lay me down on a couch and ask me questions about my life and stuff, but we never did that. She used to pull out board games, Chinese checkers and drafts and chess, and we would play these games. And for the most part, most of these sessions, which used to go for an hour and a bit from memory, she never even really used to talk that much. Every now and again, she'd sort of say, "What do you think about this?" And then that would be it. And maybe she'd ask me 2 questions per session, tops. But we didn't talk that much. It was, very odd. I kind of felt like I was being tested more than anything else, to be honest. Then the very last session was the strangest one. And, my mum brought me into the foyer, and the psychologist, as we followed the normal process, we went into the office where I was told to sit down on a chair and wait, which was different to usual. Most of the time the psychologist would be in there, but this time there was no psychologist. Once the door closed and I was sitting there waiting, a door to the side, which I'd always seen there, and I assumed it was just for a closet or something, opened, and there was like a nurse. She came out wheeling a metal trolley, and she gave me very specific instructions. She wasn't interested in talking, and she said to me, "Take all your clothes off and put this on." And it was like one of those surgical gowns, just the back that was open.
And you'd never seen
And so I never before, no. And I thought, this is odd. Okay, so maybe they're organising for me to have a physical examination, which had happened to me before a couple of times, which I also assume is normal. And I haven't seen anything yet that indicates that wasn't normal, but perhaps those other physical examinations weren't either. But anyway, so I just assumed this was a physical examination. So I took all my clothes off and put the surgical gown on, and climbed up on the trolley like she told me to. Then she came back in the room like a minute later, and she checked me over, and she saw that I'd left my underwear on, which, I was only in grade 4. Like, I felt naked under this gown thing. I wasn't going to take my underwear off. But she got very angry at me, and she ordered me to take the underwear off, which I did. Then she told me to lay down on the trolley, which I did, and she wheeled me into this other room. And this other room was like a surgery. The walls were all tiled in white tiles. There was a bright light on the roof, and there were 4 men in the room, completely covered in surgical gowns, like what a surgeon wears, wearing paper masks over their face. The way that you'd expect medical people would. So I couldn't see their faces, but I could see that they were late middle-aged men. And they proceeded to spend the next, could have been an hour, maybe 2 hours. It was a long time, going over every single part of my body. They started off with my fingertips, and they examined them all together. And then they looked at my fingernails, and then they moved up to my finger joints, and they moved each individual joint, looked at the skin. They went over every part of my body. It was like, I thought it was very unusual. I got very bored after a while, but they very gently moved each and every joint and looked at each square centimeter of skin, just checking me out, I suppose. They did spend it seemed like an inordinate amount of time looking at my groin, at my genitalia. I don't know, that they seem to be wanting to make sure that everything about me was right. I can't tell you why they were doing this, but they did. They were very respectful. There was nothing pedophilic about it. And then at the end of it,
subject of an experiment or anything, or did you feel like at a place being probed and whatnot?
I felt like they were checking me out to make sure that I wasn't deformed in any way, that I had grown okay, so to speak. That's what I felt like.
Well, before you
it
go on,
didn't feel like an experiment. Right. Yeah.
Well, before you go on, what did the floor look like? You said the walls had white tiles, correct?
Yeah.
So what do you remember what the floor looked like at all?
No, I can't remember the floor. I think it was vinyl. Like those fake vinyl tiles, maybe?
Like the commercial tile?
Yeah. It wasn't... Go on.
Do you remember seeing anything weird like drains or grates, anything like that in the floor? Or was it just like a vinyl tile surface?
I felt like the thought that went through my head at the time was that it was like I'd been wheeled into a giant shower. So, in the way that,
tile on the walls would definitely give you that feeling.
So, maybe, yeah, I mean, it I'm sorry, I can't remember the floor that much.
It's okay. It's okay.
I didn't spend that much time looking at it because I was looking up.
Yeah, let's not spend any more time on the floor. Go ahead,
That's
continue
all right. So I thought, wow, like they're very thorough in this therapy they're giving me. They went over me psychologically, and now they're checking out my body in insane detail. But anyway, at the end of that, at conclusion of that, these men who didn't say anything, they didn't speak once, motioned to the nurse that it was time to take me back out again. So she comes over and she just wheels the trolley back out with me laying on it, and the door closes to that room. She then says, "Get up off the trolley and get dressed, and somebody will be in a minute." And that was it. And she walked back out of the room, back into the other room, and that was it. And I thought, wow, that was amazingly thorough. And that was so I got dressed, and then a couple of minutes later, the psychologist came back and took me back out to my mother. And then on my way home, my mother says to me, "Oh, they've told me that we don't need any more sessions with the therapist. You're perfectly fine now." And I'm like, "Oh, okay."
Did you ever tell her what was going on?
About a decade and a half ago. So when I was about 23, I was looking back on it, and I was thinking to myself, you know what, that's not normal. Mm-hmm. That's not normal in any way, shape, or form. I was starting to realize that a lot of stuff that I thought was normal wasn't at that point. And so I said to her, I said, "Do you, like, why was it that they had to do that physical examination at that therapist?" And she said, "What?" And I said, "Well, you remember the therapist you took me to when I was in grade 4? And she went, "Yeah." And I said, like, why did they want me to take my clothes off, and why did they need to like, check me out? Did you ask for that specifically? And she said, No, they just told me it was occupational therapist, and they just wanted to give me some tips on playing with the other kids." So I told her about what they did, and she was shocked. She was quite, horrified. And I said, "Why did you decide to do that?" And she said, "Well, the school told me I should." So she did. She did what she was told. So that was when I was in grade 4, and that was the start of when things started to go a little crazy. From that point onwards, I started having these weird dreams, which I thought were dreams at the time, but they were incredibly realistic, and there were these scenario plays, like tests. And I would suddenly be in a place. The first dreams that happened, I used to have these over and over again. It was like Groundhog Day every night, and it was the same scenario. And what would happen is I would find myself in a park somewhere, in a secluded area, maybe even in like a large concrete drain or under a bridge or something. I can't really remember exactly where it was, but it was in a park, in some kind of shelter. And there was a woman standing there. It would always be like a woman or somebody relatively helpless. Now, bearing in mind, I'm only in grade 4 at this point in time, so like an adult woman is like, towering over me. Well, maybe like half a foot taller than me or so anyway. I was already starting to grow a lot faster and bigger than most of the other kids my age. This woman would be standing there waiting for somebody. I could never tell you who she was waiting for, but she was waiting for someone. And I would approach her. Now, I'd like to explain at this point in time, it's like watching a movie. I have no control over what I'm doing. So I approach her, and I attack her. And I rip her apart, literally, like, not figuratively, literally, like tear her limbs off, like an animal. Blood and gore everywhere, and it was pretty horrific for a grade 4 type of kid to be seeing, I think.
Yeah.
Seriously.
Suddenly,
and you had no control over any of this.
Let me
no, it was like
interrupt
I
here.
was watching through my own eyes. Yeah.
The virtual reality training is very much like that. You don't have it's like you're programmed to do this and you don't know why you're doing it, and it's like it's not real, but it is. And when you wake up the next morning, it's, what the fuck was that?
Pretty much. Except it used to scare the bejesus out of me the first couple of times.
Yeah,
because
it
I
does.
was a good kid. I was a good kid. Killing people was not something that had occurred to me to do. And suddenly I would find myself in control again, and I'm covered in gore and blood and bits of entrails and stuff, and all this mess in this space, and basically not knowing what to do. So, of course, the first couple of times I did it, I just ran. And I would run and I would run, and that would be it. And then after a few nights, I decided, you know what, I gotta hand myself in. So then I decided I would try and find a police officer. And as the nights progressed, and I did the same scenario over and over again, I started figuring out where the police station was. So I would go to the police station, and then to begin with, it was like there was nobody at the station. Then I figured out if I went around the back of the station, I could find an officer working on paperwork or something during the night. So I would get his attention, and he would come out and he would talk to me. And then I eventually, like I said, this is Groundhog Day over and over again. And then I would explain to him and say, I've just killed somebody. I'd be crying, and I'd be like, you've got to come with me. I've got to show you. And he would say, so, like, where'd you kill this person? You know, like, and eventually I would try to convince him to show him. And eventually I got him to come have a look. And I showed him where it had happened, and there was nothing there. It was clean. And then I would look at myself, and there's nothing on me. I'm not covered in gore anymore. And then he would take me back home to where to my home, and drop me off and tell me to go back inside. You know, of course, if it was a real police officer, he'd be wondering, like, why the hell is this grade 4 kid wandering around at 1 a.m. in the morning screaming that he's killing people?
Yeah, we're your parents, kid. We need to have a little talk.
Exactly.
I think you need some of that therapy.
Exactly.
No, that's how this all got started.
And then, eventually when I did that, and I got all the way to the end of that dream, so I tried to hand myself in as best as I could, and then that scenario stopped. And I got to tell you, I was so grateful when that stopped, because I got sick of killing people. Then there was a new scenario. Anyway, there were a number of scenarios. Looking back on it now, I now realize that what that scenario was teaching me to do is, if I ever lost control, it was programming me to hand myself in. I now recognize that. I know that that's what that scenario program was for. It was teaching me that if I ever went out of control, that I was to find an authority and hand myself in.
That's a pretty sinister program.
Yeah.
In my
opinion.
There were
most of the programming they give us is sinister.
Yeah, I don't imagine nice people tend to advance quickly through the ranks of Nacht Waffen.
If you start freaking out, unicorns. yeah, where's that programming?
Then
dream on. They want us to kill people, but only the people they want us to kill.
Now, do you guys have any shared experiences?
Well, let them get to.
Oh, yeah.
Well, continue
Oh,
on
we
where you're
will.
going because
We will. Trust me.
we got as much
And a
time as
really
we
good one
need.
too. But they wanted to. I now understand what they were trying to do was they wanted to make me programmed to hand myself in if I went out of control, but they also wanted to make sure that that I would hand myself in if I'd done something that I wasn't supposed to. Later on in the year, I started noticing, looking back on it, I started realizing things were changing in my body. I was getting much bigger and stronger and faster than the other kids. There was this bully who used to pick on me. Now, at that point in time, I now realized what I had was I had like a violence lock on me. That's the only word I can use for it. I couldn't be violent. If I went to try and punch somebody, by the time my muscles would lock up, and by the time I actually made contact with them, it'd be like I just like gave them a nudge. And it really used to frustrate me. And I thought maybe it was some kind of psychological thing or something. I couldn't understand why it was that all the other kids could punch each other, but I couldn't. It's probably a good thing now I look back on it that I couldn't. But what I could do, though, whilst I could physically like kick or punch or strike somebody, I could hold somebody. So there was this bully in late grade 4, that used to pick on me all the time because I couldn't fight back, and I was already much bigger than the other kids. And of course, bullies look for people who look very impressive, who they can pick on to try and make themselves higher up on the totem pole. So he, doing his usual, he was bashing me and that sort of thing. And something I changed in my head somehow. I can't explain it. Something switched on momentarily. And I picked him up by the throat with my right arm. I just held his throat with my right hand and just picked him up off the ground and held him in the air. I could do that. The violence lock didn't stop me from doing that. So he dangled there for like about 10 or 20 seconds or so, choking. And then I suddenly realized that my teacher at the time was standing about 10 meters away from us, looking straight at us. And she was just kind of in shock. I remember the look on her face when I realized she was staring at me. And then suddenly she just said very calm to me, "You need to put him down now." Like, not angry, not like what I'd expected, but she just said, "You need to put him down." So I suddenly realized, what was I doing? And I put him back down on the ground, and he fell to the ground, clutching his throat because I'd squeezed it pretty hard. And after about 30 seconds, he managed to get to his feet and sort of scamper away. And I thought to myself, oh, I am in so much shit. and the teacher...
Yeah, that would be the normal response, was for you to be in trouble for that.
Yeah, and she came over and she said, "You can't do that. You can't be doing that to the other kids. You're going to get into trouble. You need to make sure you don't do that again." Which was not the response I expected. And that was the end of it. I never heard another word about that incident ever again. A number of things happened in the years afterwards where similar sorts of events happened. When I was in grade 7, just before I went to high school, it did come to a climax. Like, these things maybe happen like once a year or so. Oh, sorry, this is in grade 6, beg your pardon. Now, in grade 6, things started really changing rapidly. I had a military officer from the Australian Defence Force as my teacher. He used to wear his officer's hat, his slouch hat, when he was on, lunch duty, walking around the yard making sure the kids aren't killing each other. He was a captain in the army, and he was my teacher. Now from what I know now, I now realize that that's not normal. At that point, I really liked him. We got on like a house on fire. We used to talk a lot, strangely enough. The other teachers didn't really used to interact with him a lot, but he was a military officer, and periodically he would be away doing stuff with the army. That's what we were told. But most of the time he worked with my class as a teacher. This is very unusual in Australia. This is not normal. So
Do you guys have,
I now know, but at the time I thought it was normal.
Do you guys have like
Right.
ROTC programs or anything like that there?
No,
No.
not at all. It would not be in any way, shape, or form normal for a military officer to be teaching a class in primary school.
Yeah, definitely teaching.
See, in American schools, the military basically uses schools as, fertile ground to recruit kids and get them into that mindset of, hey, you want to be in the military early on while they're still in high school. So
they've got these programs they call them ROTC, and they
Reserve-
basically
we have
recruiting high school
cadet-
kids into the military. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we
Yeah,
have
my
cadet programs.
my youngest was in ROTC through high school,
Well,
and it was an Air Force program, and he was taking ROTC and drill team instead of PE, and he was incredibly good at it.
see, I was always nervous of the kids that, like, not everybody in ROTC, but the kids that just took ROTC way too seriously. And, every school's got a few.
Yeah, my youngest came up with one day that the Air Force wouldn't lie to us. And I swear that's the scariest thing any of my kids have ever told me. And I dug out my copy of 1984 and made the kid read it.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Sorry, Cael, go ahead.
Well, the thing is that we weren't being taught. He wasn't teaching us military stuff at all. He wasn't teaching us anything. He was just teaching us normal math, science, English, the normal stuff, Then one day, the students were doing this thing which they call dead arm, which is where they punch you in the shoulder until you can't move your arm anymore, and damage your nerves in your shoulder. I was still considered a bit of a soft target at this point because of this violence lock. I couldn't retaliate. So this poor kid, he decided he was going to give me a dead arm. So this was morning tea, and he came running over to me and tried to hold me down and started punching me in the shoulder over and over and over again. And something had already happened at this point in time.
Cutting down some
Good
trees.
Lord, what's that?
sounded like a chainsaw.
That was a motorcycle going past my place.
As
I
long as
live
it
on-
wasn't a swarm of killbots.
I live on the main back road to Yosemite, and it's a motorcyclist's magnet.
Wow. Well, so this kid started punching me. Now, somebody had already done this to me on my way to school in the morning, so I wasn't really in the mood for it. And he started doing it, and I just remember there was that feeling of something in my head was different. I was emotionless. I was it's like my mind was suddenly superconductive, and the world just seemed to slow down. And I remember the look on his face when I looked him straight in the eye, and I remember him looking back at me as if he had just seen something very scary. And he just got up as fast as he could, and I remember him running. And I remember just staring at him running away from me thinking, wow, it looks like he's running so slow. Like it looked like he was trying to run through molasses or tar or something, you know. And I got up, and even after giving him that head start, I crossed maybe 15 meters of paving in about, I remember it was just like 2 steps. It was like I felt like I literally fell through the air, flew through the air. And I caught up to him in about 2 steps, picked him up, threw him up against the brick wall, held him up in the air against the brick wall, and just started pounding his chest. I think I punched him maybe 7 or 8 times. And I remember the feeling of his ribs cracking under my fist, and I remember the sounds he was making. And suddenly, I think the teacher came out, the military officer, and he said, "Stop." And I suddenly, something snapped again, and I was fully back again. And I realized I had blood on me, and this kid was not looking good. And I just dropped him, and he just fell to the ground like a sack of potatoes. And he was coughing and spitting out blood and stuff, you know. And he sort of like scampered away. And he went running off. And the teacher came over to me, and he said, "What happened?" And I said, I don't know. He was punching me. And then he said, "Yes, I saw." And then I started crying, and I said, "I'm so sorry. I don't, like, I didn't mean to. I didn't want to." And he said, "I understand." He said, "Don't worry about it. I saw everything. You don't have anything to worry about." And I said to him, "But he's not good. He needs help." And my teacher said, "Don't worry about it. It'll be taken care of."
Sometimes those combat instincts kick in and you just black out.
Pretty much. At that point in time, they were already teaching me how to do things. I just didn't realize it. And the drugs and the stuff that they were pumping into me were, you know, starting to really kick in. And I remember looking around, and all the kids were just staring at me, and some were crying and stuff. And I thought, I've really blown it this time. Like, I'm in deep shit. But the teacher was very understanding, and apparently the next day when I came to school, I was fully expecting police to be there, you know, but nothing. It was like it never happened. The kid wasn't there. I asked after the kid, and my teacher said that he was in hospital, and then an ambulance had come and taken him there. But he told me not to worry. He's been advised that the kid will pull through. And I was like,
Dang.
"Oh, okay, that's good." But I was still very worried. I was told that the teacher spoke to the parent, who was furious.
I'll bet.
But
well,
the parent was told that it was her child's fault, and that he pretty much had it coming, and that, you know, all that sort of stuff. About 3 months later, the kid came back to class, started coming back to class again after coming out of hospital. And he was very nervous around me after that, understandably, I suppose. And it was I think what had happened was that particular day was that they took that violence lock off to see what would happen.
Or maybe your rage was just so much you broke through it. I mean, Penny, you've had that happen to you before, right? Where you were able to break through blocks just on sheer whatever. Like,
well,
anger.
I've learned that if I can get angry enough, it breaks through the block. Yes. I have used that to counterattack whenever that I've been shot, and I've been used that to attack the computers behind the mind control that they keep throwing at me. And I must be doing something because I was at Contact in the Desert this last weekend, and Lou and I were followed both directions, and especially when we went past Edwards Air Force Base. So I must be actually doing what I'm thinking I'm doing to get that kind of response. So, yeah.
I suspect I know who that was that was following you too, but I won't go into that today.
Okay. There's when they put the firewall on you, you can get a high enough adrenaline level to get past it. And that's probably what happened, was that Cael got so tired of being bullied that he finally, that day, it broke. It's also possible that they took it off to see what he would do. Yeah, to see just how far he would go.
I wouldn't put anything past them. People that are behind these types of things.
I mean, people that are going to pump a little kid full of those kinds of drugs and put him in a regular school with other kids and put a military officer to observe. What else are you going to put past them?
Yeah, like there's no really telling how far they'll go.
Yeah, grade 6 was a rough year, but that's when I think they took it off, because after that point in time, I could, like, you know those goats, when you scare them, they go stiff and fall over?
Yeah, the fainting goats.
Yeah, that's exactly what used to happen to me. The more I got enraged, the more my muscles locked up, and I couldn't do anything. Like, I could have almost fallen over. I could not move. And I thought this was really unfair, and I thought maybe it was some sort of psychological thing. But that day, that was the last time it ever happened. Things moved on from that point in time. When I was in grade 8, something had already started happening. Things really became what I now realize were more unusual. I started being able to, I was memorizing military ranks and insignias and that sort of stuff to a navy in space that didn't exist. But I knew them all. I could recognize all the badges and insignias and stuff, and I was being, for some reason, I felt like, at this particular point in time, it was important that I studied all the badges and ranks, insignias and whatnot, so I knew who I was talking to when I would talk to them. I was memorizing the different types of craft, the different types of ships, their general layouts, propulsion systems, field propulsion systems, energy production units, supplies, all this stuff. I don't know why I was memorizing this stuff, and I don't know where I was getting the information from at that point in time. I was just writing it down, and I was drawing them and making heaps of notes. I now know that the craft I was drawing were the Nacht Waffen crafts, the vessels that you see Alina illustrating. I could tell you where all of the parts, all of the different schematics. I could draw the schematics off them for you very easily. In fact, I used to have them printed out at home up until about 10 years ago, when for some bizarre reason I decided that they were absolutely pointless and I should just throw them all away. So I don't know why I disposed of them, but I had all the ranks and all the craft and all the schematics.
Was that about the time you got married?
Yes.
Was when you threw them all away? Yeah. Okay, that makes sense.
Actually, come to think of it, that's a good point, Penny. So,
it's scary when I know somebody,
Then, so things, I was being indoctrinated, basically, as a, I suppose you'd say an ensign, or like an officer cadet at that point in time. I didn't understand what was going on, but I had like two lives. Like I was the life where I was going to school and learning, and then there was the other life that I didn't know when it happened or how it happened, but it was happening. I had to memorize the map of Mars. I can still look at general parts of Mars from space, and I can still tell you exactly where we are on the planet. I was memorizing it. I didn't know why. It was like my homework I had to do for the other school that I went to. The geography of Mars is something I'm very familiar with.
I can't remember the map of Mars. It's like that has been deliberately blocked from me. Okay. And that's weird because...
So that was very strange. But I knew something had changed significantly in me when at the end of year 8, I was 13, and those Christian guys with the little red Bibles, Gideons or whatever they are, came to the school to give us a talk on Christianity and hand out little Bibles to all of us. And we all had to stand in line, and we all had to get our little red Bible. And while I was standing in line, I was thinking to myself, I got to tell you, the thoughts I was thinking were not positive towards these Christian people. But it was suddenly like, well, before this age, I had been something like Christian, I suppose. And then suddenly, when I was 12, maybe 13, there was a huge change. Suddenly I became militaristically atheistic. Religion was literally a control mechanism for the population. I hated people who spread religion, all this sort of stuff. I'd suddenly become like I'd lost a lot of empathy, and religion was not a good thing. And I remember standing there in line. My mind was thinking all these thoughts coming out of nowhere, and suddenly I was at the front of the line, and he hands me this little red Bible. And I looked down at it. I thought to myself, why are you trying to push this stuff on me? And I thought, this is incredibly primitive thinking. I didn't say anything. I just kind of wandered away, because at this point in time, I'm still incredibly confused. And now I realize that I can remember more about what happened back then, but it was just before then that I'd done the ceremony with the black goo. I was now thinking along those lines instead.
It's kind of interesting. You describe the early childhood parts. It almost sounds like a Solar Warden recruitment. How did you? But yeah, I agree. Did you end up in the?
All of the programs use similar training techniques.
They do, but
Cael is a generation behind me, so they had softened it from kidnap you and mind fracture you and do this into a longer term sort of propaganda brainwashing thing.
Well,
they start
with the
same little
teaching me was it was it was hard for me when I was in grade 9. I remember we were studying World War II and modern history and stuff, and I was simultaneously being taught what the German free colonies teach their kids about modern history. And the two were really different.
Really different, yes.
Yeah, I'd say so. I mean,
really different.
Well, look, we do have to take a short break. So when we get back, though, I'd like to get more into, the darkfleet stuff. Nacht Waffen. Say it, Penny.
Yeah.
Nacht Waffen.
Nacht
Nacht
Waffen.
All right. So we're gonna dive headfirst into that.
We even have some questions from our audience.
We do, and we'll get to those. And we have questions of our own, obviously. And Penny, if you wouldn't mind, actually, right when we get back, if you want to just give us a quick rundown of Woodstock in the desert.
Okay.
That'd be awesome.
But,
maybe for our new listeners,
I can do that.
If we could cover like maybe a minute or two about what Nacht Waffen is, just to bring everybody who's not familiar with the concept out there in the audience up to speed.
All right, and we'll do that just as soon as we get back from the break. So, guys, we'll see you on the other side there.
Thanks, guys.
Systems, the company store, the paradigm of absolute control. And that's why we're just out here doing simple things, pointing out that we're meant to be in nature and be natural. And this is where we find the source that God made to transcend the New World Order. And that's why they want to try to keep us out of it.
I'm angry. I've had enough of these people. They're a bunch of Christian murderers, scum. They're on giant death factories, keeping babies alive and selling their body parts. What more do you need to know about these people? I go out and face these scum. They literally crawl out from under rocks. They have green looking skin and they run around screaming, we love Satan, we wanna eat babies. I have them on video. Hillary's in the creepy weird sick stuff, man. She sleeps in the same room with that creepy weird woman whose mother wears a hood over her head. What the hell? That woman number one is ugly. Imagine how bad she smells, man. I'm told her and Obama just stink. Obama and Hillary both smell like sulfur. Literal vampire pot and the goblins are hobbling round coming after us. My spirit gets close to that evil and I feel it go. We're such self-centered crap. We don't even notice hell itself rising up against us. Millions of pointed people of the very worst type, and I'm so pissed. We're gonna stab your daughter at the mall. We're gonna stab your wife, your son. We're gonna stab you with a butcher knife, and then the police chief is gonna say, we love our Somalis, we love our Muslims. Oh, they're so good, oh, they're so sweet.
Like beef. I smell 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 like beef.
this fucking thing over here. Where'd it go? This thing right here to Amtrak. And then try to see what else we got to say about it.
Squeeze. Want to. Already 1.5% of all babies born in Western Europe and America will need to continue.
That's the thing, Dan. You don't know what the fuck you're talking about at all. Shut up.
Continue reading this article. Yeah, thanks, these scientists. Eat my balls.
How about you donate to our Patreon? All right. Oh, that was an incredible douchebag tonight, man.
Yeah.
Я пришел дать эту песню.
Hey guys, and we are back. And once again, I'm Don.
I'm Dan.
This is Reality Brief.
And we have our engineer in training, Zach, in the studio with us tonight.
Say hi, Zach.
Hello.
So he'll be pushing buttons eventually, and it's going to be great. And it'll be, so instead of us being like, oh, we suck, we'll be like, Zach did it. It's his fault.
We'll be able to blame all of
we
our
were like,
technical difficulties on somebody else.
He's like, I don't know what I'm doing. I was like, it's okay. We'll train you. Anyway,
before we dive back into everything, I just wanted to thank all of our friends on Patreon who've stopped by and decided to give us a few bucks. Likewise, everybody who's gone to Bandcamp and named your price for one of our episodes. Every little bit helps.
Or bought a T-shirt.
Yeah, anyone who's bought a T-shirt, we just want to say thanks for helping to keep the party boat afloat. Thanks to our YouTube and Twitch subscribers.
Thanks, guys. We appreciate it. Where's the button?
And of course, tonight's sponsors. Who sponsored us tonight? Raytheon and Tavistock.
Sounds about right. Raytheon and Tavistock. Yeah, I'm still waiting on a check from the Mossad, Dan. I promise.
Yeah, I haven't gotten my Mossad check either. I'm starting to get a little upset with these guys.
I promise I'll split it with you, Dan. I didn't get it yet.
I mean, look.
So anyway, before we get too deep back into the secret space program stuff, Penny, you were recently at the Contact in the Desert. You want to just give us a brief rundown of how that went? I know there's people out there listening that are dying to hear about it. So,
okay, I went to find out what conferences were like because I'm going to be speaking in one in October, and it's too easy to be a jerk, and I don't want to be one. So what I did.
So
well, she's friends with
Thanks, Cael. I thought you liked me. Anyway,
just one officer to another.
Anyway, I wore my Reality Brief T-shirt on opening day with a white skirt, and I thought I looked pretty good. And we got photos of me sitting with Dr. Sasha Lesson and showing off the T-shirt. And they're posted on Facebook.
Rock on. Yeah, if you need photographic evidence of this, please visit our Facebook group on Facebook. I got to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure I shared the album that it was in to Reality Brief, the group.
It's in there. I don't know who shared it, but I think I might have, actually.
You might have too. Mm-hmm. That's okay. The more the merrier. But I found probably a dozen of the people that I know from Facebook and everybody was just like they present themselves on Facebook. So it was like old home week.
Man,
and
that's refreshing, huh?
That was really refreshing. And I was having a blast. Lou and I could not afford the $440 to buy the weekend pass, so we came as volunteers. I worked in the registration office, and Lou did security in the rooms. And so we saw more of the underbelly. And I think the people that go should know that the hotel took most of the ticket money. So the speakers really aren't getting as much money as everybody thinks they are. They're getting like $200 pop, plus half of the ticket money on their workshops. So you might think about that before you say that everybody's all in it for the money. Because if they had to pay for a plane ticket in a hotel room, odds are they lost money on the deal.
Oh, yeah.
I got to meet some of my longtime heroes, like Whitney Strieber and Travis Walton.
Oh, wow.
And I got to meet Grant Cameron, and he was an absolute gentleman, even came to the registration office to meet me.
Awesome.
So I had one fan who said he had watched every video I'd ever done, and I invited him to watch this one.
Sweet.
Awesome.
The secret episode. I didn't promote you at all. I was like, nah, it's going to be great. It's going to be a surprise.
I know. It's going to be surprise. Penny's here. Yeah. But yeah, we had a dress code for our volunteers. You had to have a white top and either a dark blue or white bottom. So the day that I met Grant Cameron, I was wearing this 25-year-old party outfit that was Battenberg lace and beads and sequins, but it was all white. Met the dress code.
Next year, I'll have to make sure you get a white Reality Reef t-shirt.
You have to put the print in another
Penny
color.
struggles with dress code.
Huh.
Yes, Penny and all my alters struggle with the dress code. So we had agreed during the break that I would talk about this particular pair of altars of mine and Cael's and how we came to work together in Nacht Waffen. This particular altar belonged, past tense, to Kruger. She was considered a super soldier. Kruger does not educate their staff. They train them for the position they're supposed to do. So here, she was in this situation. I always called her Starbuck because that's the kind of personality she has. And I had been waking up in her for years. She is not integrated. This is someone I wake up in and so have partial checking on her. Moments, not anything continuous. But she has been a fighter pilot, very much like Starbuck in Battlestar Galactica. And what they're doing is Kruger sells their services to various ETs in wars. And so she was flying a fighter ship in space and taking part in mercenary activities in wars all over this part of the galaxy. Well, last September, she got hit, and the shot came through the front of her ship and hit the screen. You know, they talk about the glass pads. Well, her screen that she had instead of a window is made out of glass, and it completely shattered, and she ended up with so many cuts from it that they did get her back on board the ship to the medical unit, and she died while they were doing the initial checking. Triage, that's the word. While they were doing the triage, she died. And basically it was the death of 1,000 cuts. And
so when one of your alters dies, what do you experience?
What I experienced was I felt her death, and I knew I was there with her when she was dying.
Gotcha.
And she came home to me, and they left her with me long enough. We were starting the reintegration, and I went to sleep, and the next day Kruger had already pulled her back into a new clone. And Cael's ship was a Nacht Waffen ship, but it used our mothership as a home port. And so he was kind of undercover because he does spy work. And so he was dressed like a Kruger officer in the khaki pants and boots, and it looks like it looks like the leather jacket that the pilots wore in World War II. And then there's a cap like a flight cap. So he looked really good in that. And I noticed he kept watching me. Well, that particular altar had an external exoskeleton that was surgically implanted. So she was really rough looking. But he kept watching and kept watching and kept watching. And after she came back, she got a promotion to commander. So she was actually a higher rank than the other altar I talk about.
Okay, but before we go any further, for any new listeners out there, what we're talking about here is a mercenary group who takes splintered consciousnesses. Think about like MK Ultra and how they use trauma to split a consciousness up into, several consciousnesses, and they can program them to do whatever they want, like the assassin. We know about the MK Ultra program. You guys watching this, you should be at least familiar with that. So essentially, this is kind of like that, only they take the consciousness and they put it in a cloned or cyborg body, correct?
Correct. This altar is put into a cloned body, and when she dies, she comes back to me because I'm in the natural body that we are all really from. And the tech that allows this is a combination of things from the Draco and the Mantids. So this is tech we have purchased with human beings. And Elena has a wonderful video about the tech. So it's out there already. But after she came back from the death of 1,000 cuts, Cael, who was Nacht Waffen, specifically requested her to be his navigator. So Nacht Waffen bought her from Kruger. So now she belongs to Nacht Waffen. So here she is, this uneducated, basically street fighter, rough as hell, is now trying to learn how to be a Nacht Waffen officer.
Oh boy.
And Cael is teaching her. So he makes her do dress whites for dinner and keep her boots off the counter and all kinds of stuff.
Oh, you're such a hard ass, Cael.
And she's having a hell of a time cooperating. And something happened last January that I still don't know what it was. Cael will have to tell you because I think he knows. But we came back to the mothership and she was called into sick bay and they put her down like a rabid dog. And she was back with me for another 36 hours and they took her back and put her in another cloned body. And at the time,
I understand what had happened was there was an infection, and essentially it was easier just to basically destroy the body and just pop you into a new one, so to speak. It sounds like it's simple. Like I've simplified it an awful lot. I have, but it's a very complicated, expensive process. I understand, but essentially the only way to essentially liberate you from this infection was to do that. Sorry, go on, Penny.
So at the time, he told me, you've gone through 2 bodies in 6 months. You're getting expensive. You're going to have to stop this shit. So.
Yeah.
You're breaking the bank, huh?
Yeah, I'm breaking the bank. So.
I didn't think
the space shekels.
I didn't think they were typically that concerned with finances.
What I remember is we're on this ship that is called the Sparrow in English. We speak English on the ship, and there are 4 humans, and the rest of the crew is all ETs. And we go around trading weapons and other contraband, and while we gather intel, and that's why the crew is
point of what we do.
Yeah, the intel is the point of what we do. So we have things like 7-year-old scotch on board, where everybody else only has vodka. So we have luxuries.
We don't have much of it.
No, and it's like, this is what you need to know is this is what we're doing. And that Cael specifically requested me, and that Nacht Waffen paid for my contract.
Okay.
That's correct.
Before we get too far ahead, Cael, how did you wind up in Nacht Waffen? I feel silly speaking in German.
No.
You're getting better at it.
All right, thank you.
Look, I wish I could tell you more. I don't precisely know how I wound up with the Germans.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know whether or not I was made to work with the Germans to begin with. I don't know whether or not, like, I can't tell you. It's a mystery to me.
Right.
I know the how the Germans we call them the Germans, but I mean we should call them the German free colonies. That's what they call themselves.
Das
The
Bundes.
free colonies.
They call
Yeah,
themselves
Das Bundes.
Das Bundes.
And they recruit because you got to remember they have a fairly limited gene pool, so to speak. We're not talking about we're not talking about millions and millions of people here.
So they're lacking in the
and what
they're lacking in the people who can expand out and have like psionic abilities and stuff like that. Correct. This is why they recruit.
Yeah, well, what they like to do is they like to recruit talent. They look for people who are intelligent, who have the natural telepathy, the skills, and they recruit them. They will often buy slaves. They will. They don't care where these people come from. They don't care if they're Jewish, African, Asian. Doesn't matter.
Yeah,
They're
most
not, hey,
most
dude,
of the
I'm part
Nazis.
Jewish.
Well, he's all Jewish.
Most of what is identified as Nazi on Earth went away when they started dealing with ETs on a regular basis. Mm-hmm. When you're dealing with,
if it was there to begin with at all.
Right.
When you're dealing with Draco and Mantids and Greys and all the vast beings out there on a daily basis, the differences between different races of humans pretty much disappear.
Suddenly, even between sexes, they don't really, like, they still have some residual like pre-political correctness ideas of male and female roles in society.
And they make me wear a skirt with my dress whites.
Yeah. Exactly. They're very proper. But like their notion that what people just assume that they would be racist and really they're not. They don't give a shit where you come from, what your background is. If you're good and you can contribute, they will consider recruiting you. That's all they care about.
If you're a total pain in the ass, the commander will put you out the airlock.
See, as opposed to Earth Society,
it's a lot of
if you're a total
paperwork.
pain in the ass, they typically elect you.
Exactly.
We have a couple of questions from from people who've written in. We have a guy who asked, and this is for Cael. In the second school, were there children of other nationalities, or an educational version of Field Day? Side note: Miss Penny has a pleasant aura.
Thank you.
Were there other children of other nationalities?
Yeah, in that second school.
Yeah, in the other.
The other.
The other, yes.
I recall maybe the odd Asian-looking kid.
Okay, so
I don't. Yeah, I mean, my memories of that time are pretty slim. I mean, you got to remember the memories come and go.
Right.
Sometimes I'll be able to remember stuff fully, and then other times, if somebody was to say to me, oh, you know how you were talking about blah, blah, blah. And I'd be like, yeah, I remember talking about it, but I
Oh, I know somebody
can't
like
actually
that.
remember.
Yeah. There are days that Cael is like, none of this is real. This is crazy. This isn't happening. And then there are other days that it's like the details just roll off the tongue. And I think the difference is whether or not he's had a recent mind wipe.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I mean, my understanding is that the memories are all there. It's not that this concept that, like, I know that there are some people where they've created altars and they've used those altars, but in my case, that's not what they did in me. Right. What I have is that they in certain circumstances, I have access to all of my memories. Right now, I don't. But when I'm up there, I have access to all my memories. But what I have access down here, I think it kind of depends on how much they basically froze the last time they brought me back. I think that's why sometimes some months I can remember more and other months I can't. Because I think basically they literally have to basically go in or somehow and basically go, okay, this body of memories is not accessible at the moment. Like a partitioned hard drive almost.
Right. I've got another question here, but it's going to require just a little bit of lead up. We had talked earlier, and you had talked about receiving a promotion. How do you ascend?
Yeah, he's a major now.
How do you ascend through the ranks? Like, what do you do? What's the requirements of moving up?
Well, in the German, in Nacht Waffen, and by the way, Nacht Waffen means night forces. Mm-hmm. It doesn't mean night force. It's a plural. It's referring to what you would call Air Force, Navy, Army. All of that it's a nickname.
Right.
Yeah, because they refer to space as the night. They
actually.
Yes.
And
exactly.
I would compare.
And it's funny once you know all of these nicknames. Sorry, go on.
No. Please do.
Once you know all these nicknames, you start to realize just how much stuff is out there that is where people who are in the know are openly talking about this stuff, particularly the German colonies.
Right.
In music, popular music, all that sort of stuff. Like there's a lot of particular groups who I think are either getting their inspiration from pre-existing music and whatnot that's out there already, or the writer of that music has that background and is aware of it.
Well, a few years ago, back in 2012, there was this movie that came out called Iron Sky, and it was about pretty much that. It was like a fan-made, crowd-funded sci-fi flick about Nazis coming back from the moon to invade Earth, and there was this one band called Leibach that pretty much like did the soundtrack, and it's all like martial industrial. It's actually pretty good. Yeah,
and I got to tell you, industrial music is one of the popular forms of music out there.
Excellent.
To say that they have a particular genre of music, which is specifically the German colonies, would be bullshit. I mean, they listen to the classical is a big thing out there. There's a lot more classical music out there than there is down here. I'll tell you that much.
But I would imagine the industrial scene is.
The beat don't drop like it drops on Siri station, man. I'm telling you.
What I would say is that industrial music was inspired, I think, by the genre of music that developed out there. To be honest,
makes sense. Electronic.
That's what I felt.
Seems like a logical.
Yeah.
But you should know that Officer Training School, Holst Jupiter, is the theme music for that.
Yeah,
well, it's an anthem. It's not all of Jupiter. It's just the specific part of that's in the Jupiter song. And if you listen to the words to that particular song, I mean, you'll hear it played at particular military events, and if you know the words, there's no doubting where it's come from. I mean, it's talking about, you know, all earthly things above and things like that, you know.
There are words?
I mean...
We're gonna...
The English version has words, yes.
I'm gonna grab that. I'm gonna grab that information off you, and we're gonna post that to our Facebook group, guys. So out there listening, if you're not already a member, join it, and you'll get to see exactly what we're talking about here. We're not gonna play it though because we don't want to get the PP smash.
Well, it's we'll post a link to our Facebook page later. You know, I grew up on Gustav Holst's Planet Suite. Like, my mom was a percussionist, so you know, I remember hearing that from a very early age. But I definitely haven't ever heard a version with words.
So, kind of.
You'll be surprised because I heard it, and I remember the first time when I started at the officer training school when I was about 13 up there, and I remember being at home and listening to it and going, how come I know this piece of music? And then I kept saying to my dad, what are the words? Where are the words to this song? I want to remember the words. And he's like, it's classical music. There are no words. And I'm like, no, there are words.
There are words, and they're available on Earth in English, but not in German.
Interesting.
That's correct. Yeah.
And I've seen a video with the Queen of England singing it.
Yep.
I got another question here.
You know, I mean, you listen to the words. Yeah. Sorry, go on.
Oh, I got another question here. Wanting to know about, did they teach you any types of meditation?
Yes.
I'm assuming to control whatever it is that was getting triggered when you were a kid.
Yeah, I've always meditated. I didn't know it was meditating. Nobody told me that it was meditating, but I was already doing it long before I was a teenager, and I still do it now. I will sit in the shower, and by the way, the shower is the best place to be meditating for many reasons. And
not here. We have rationed water.
Okay.
And
shower and wash clothes on the same day.
Exactly.
But I meditated. I've been meditating since I was a kid. Nobody told me to do it in my normal life. It's just something that I do.
So they weren't handing out yoga lessons.
I've been astral traveling since I was a little kid. So
awesome. So yeah, they weren't handing out yoga lessons.
I didn't realize I was astral traveling. No.
At the academy.
I think there are certain things that they kind of expect you to have already know or have figured out.
That makes sense.
I mean, I disassociate. I didn't know it was disassociating.
You disassociate a lot.
That everybody did. Yeah.
No.
I didn't realize.
Normals do not disassociate.
I just assumed it was something people did. I always wondered why people seem to not do it, you know.
Normals do not disassociate.
Normies,
only
please.
People...
Normies.
What?
Normies.
Normies.
God,
normies do not disassociate. You only disassociate easily if you have been through extreme trauma. Usually that includes MK Ultra, satanic ritual abuse, or the good old pedophile. So you don't disassociate if you're a good kid that's never been involved in any of that. So those people grow up
some sort of situation.
You have to have been through ongoing habitual abuse that's bad enough that you separate yourself from it. And that's how you learn to disassociate.
Yeah, and I mean, I've seen people, you know, who have those conditions just from, you know, a rough upbringing. You know, having parents that were abusive or alcoholics, or, you know, and there wasn't anything, you know, like there wasn't any ritualistic abuse or anything even sexual. It was just, you know, getting the shit smacked out of them day after day after day.
Exactly.
You just have to learn to step aside from yourself, from your sensations, from pain, from emotional pain, all your emotions, and basically you step away from it. And, you know, I've been doing that since I can remember, and I just assumed it was something people did. And I remember I was talking to Penny maybe a month or two ago, and the funny thing is I didn't even realize I was doing it. And I said to her, like, you know, why don't, you know, it would be just really good if people could just they need to just step away from their emotions for a second, stop, what do you call it, burying themselves in it, you know, and just walk away for a minute, take a breather, and then look at it without their emotions for a minute. And then Penny says, you know, that's disassociation. People can't just do that. I'm like, oh. Okay.
Yeah.
It's not normal. It's just something else.
It's not normal. It's not something that normal people can do. It's, if you can disassociate, you have been through hell as a child, because adults will go insane rather than disassociate.
Yeah.
That's their excuse for
when
taking us as children.
But you know, a lot of the things that they said are torture. Like when they're training you, they have to teach you to drown yourself. They have to teach you to drown yourself so that they can put you into the regeneration chamber.
I've heard about
because
that
the regeneration chamber.
A lot of rituals too.
Yeah, you have to, like, if you're going all the way in. I mean, we're not just talking about a hand or a limb or something. If they have to throw you all the way in, now most of the time, it's a whole body thing, you're not conscious anyway when they put you in there, and you just wake up breathing liquid anyway, so it's no biggie. But sometimes, you know, there are times, like for instance, you've basically been in the middle of an explosion, you've got like 3rd-degree burns over most of your body. They need to get you into the chamber ASAP, and they need to put you, like, your entire body in it, which means you've got to drown yourself.
Well,
and
they
it's
can
one of
only
the skills that they teach you.
They can only do that with your natural body, because if they put a clone in, the original person of the clone will come back. The one that has not been allowed to develop a mind, the one who has never been taught anything, and has never had time to do anything. So it comes back as an infant mind in an adult body.
So, and for those of you listening may not be familiar with what they're talking about regeneration chambers filled with the liquid that grow back or regenerate your body.
The gel inside is made from black goo, and it's either blue or green, and it is supposed to have the sentient parts taken out of it.
Okay, so can you just briefly tell us what the black goo is? Just a quick.
Well,
I'll let you do that, Cael.
First of all, I don't know if that's completely right, Penny, about the green stuff in the chamber. But mind you, I think up there we all kind of have our own opinions on certain things that we don't know a lot about. Like, for example, I know that the Mantids lease Nacht Waffen, the chambers. We don't know how they fully function. We have technicians who run them, who have been trained to run them and keep them filled up with liquid and do maintenance and stuff. But those technicians don't fully understand the workings of it. And I think the Mantids do that deliberately so that basically we're dependent for the machine. Something like that. I know the Mantids supply them. The black goo itself, so I've managed to actually look into this an awful lot. So I've managed to learn a fair bit about the black goo over the years. Black goo is an artificial intelligent nanite. And what happened is, now I don't know whether or not we're talking tens of thousands of years ago or millions of years ago, but it was a human-related species. Scientists were developing all sorts of cool stuff that they were giving to the general population because they didn't have, like, currency. They didn't have that kind of concept. So basically, when a scientist invented something, it was for everybody's benefit. And they developed nanite technology, and as is natural when you develop like nanite technology, you look to see how you can use it to fix all of your problems. Get rid of cancer, fix all your diseases, fix your, make your brain work better, get rid of toxins, make your muscles stronger, faster, basically soup you up, make you a much better person. And what happened was that everything was going swimmingly with the nanite. The entire population was infected with it, and it was doing great things for everybody. And then one day, the government, the people who were running this civilization, became aware of the fact that there was that another ET species had started introducing DNA into their own population, trying to hybridize them, I suppose.
Wait, that sounds familiar.
And then the government of the time decided that essentially to use their tool that they had invented, the nanites, they gave it the instruction to hunt down these hybrids and kill them. And basically get intel. Basically, either kill them or take them over and get intel on them. So they gave the instructions to the nanites to do this. Now, this is where everything went wrong. The AI, it's the thing about artificial intelligence is if it doesn't have a fifth octave brain, so i.e. a soul attached to it, it can't do things like empathy. You could program it, but it can't. So what happened was that basically the AI was told to do something that it wasn't really able to do. It was asked to basically kill things, to find people, and instead of making them better, to kill them. Mm-hmm. And it basically had a conniption, and broke, and it went AWOL. And the population of people
in America, we call that going rogue.
I've heard the phrase
going rogue, okay.
Before. Absent while on leave.
Yeah. That's like running away from the military.
That's the one.
Actually, for a while there were these anarchist kids that were selling shirts that had, the Go Army logo, but instead of Go Army, it said Go AWOL.
Sweet.
So then it went rogue, and its mind, it is still doing what it was programmed to do, but they lost control of it at that point in time. The problem is that every single individual in the population was in some way hybridized. The definitions of what it was programmed to do were not specific enough, essentially. And once it decided that everybody was a hybrid, they were unable to control it after that.
So it basically turned him into the
and so you have
replicators from Star Trek or Stargate.
Yes.
A whole planet.
I'm not familiar with that, but
it's a whole planet where they started off just like that, like carbon-based life forms, and then they invented nanites, and the nanites eventually assimilated all the carbon-based life on the planet, its consciousness, and the whole planet turned into one giant ball of sentient nanites.
Well,
that kind of sounds similar, actually, but it's not as extreme. It didn't go that far. Mm-hmm. The people, I think, the people who had the black goo in them back then, I don't think they were fully aware of how it was changing them. It decided, started making decisions for itself. Like, for example, that empathy, having substantial amounts of empathy is not a good thing. It decided that, it still does the stuff that it was programmed to do originally. It extends people's lives significantly. They live a lot longer.
It doubles your intelligence, your IQ. It makes you super strong and invincible and keeps you healthy the whole time. until it decides that you've had enough, and then, like what happened with Max Spears before he died, he was throwing it up. It will leave the body when it can't repair it.
That's sense. True. Mm.
And then you die a miserable, horrible death.
Well, there's one other instance under which one would throw up black goo, and that is when you've been given another type of nanite that chases it out, that essentially gets rid of it. And you throw it up as well then. I sometimes have wondered whether or not what happened was that Max Spears had been infected and someone had tried to give him the stuff to get rid of it.
The antidote.
Yeah. And it just, it didn't work. It killed
there is an anti-goo, and it's white.
Yeah, it's transparent, but apparently it is a nan on it. I've had it.
I had it before I was sent back.
When I went to Mars when I was 18, I was like, I had very little empathy. I mean, the stuff that I would have done back then, like, I was very straight-laced, but I wouldn't have questioned things. I would have, if somebody had said, this person's a bad guy, you need to kill them, I would have done it. No question. But then when I came back, by the time I came back, like, I was a completely different person. A lot of the arrogance that I had was gone. And what had happened was that basically I'd been given the solution to the black goo. So it was out of my system.
Cael, you want to talk to them about the attempted takeover of our ship?
Oh my goodness, that was a pretty extreme experience. That was. How long ago was that? That was in January, was it, or?
Oh no, that was in March, April,
March, and
yeah. It hasn't been that long ago, and it was very traumatic at the time.
I went through my usual. I do certain things subconsciously when I know I'm going to be picked up for service. I'll go get a haircut. I'll trim my nails. I get certain clothes ready, all this sort of stuff, and I don't even realize I'm doing it. Really, I just feel like I want to do it. And only recently have I started recognizing, oh, okay, that's why I've been doing that. Anyway, so I knew at this particular point in time, I was due to be going active at some point. I was going to get picked up for service. So, I went to sleep, and oh, wow, stuff happened that night. Like, I went and got picked up. I don't know how long we were away for. I think maybe 3 months, maybe less. But suddenly I was in the cockpit. We call it the bridge, but it's really the cockpit of the Sparrow. It's not really big enough to be called the bridge, but technically it's the bridge. Anyway, so imagine it's like a cockpit of a airliner. There's a couple of seats, there's panels, there's displays, all that sort of stuff. There's the windows. And there's not a lot of room in there. Anyway, so I'm in the cockpit, and there's somebody who I know well, who I considered a friend, and I'm fighting him, and I don't know why he's turned on me, and I'm really conflicted about this whole thing. We've got so basically, I found myself fighting him barehanded. He didn't really stand much of a chance because of what I was originally designed to be for. So, to be honest, I don't know why he decided to try and attack me in the cockpit, but something happened. We had a crew of another ship on the Sparrow, for some reason, we had allowed them onto the ship. And while I was in the cockpit, I found this guy trying to do something to the ship's computer.
Like sabotage it somehow?
Can't remember what he was doing.
Yeah.
Sorry?
Like sabotaging it somehow?
Yeah.
Yeah, sabotaging it. And I came up behind to the door and saw what was going on, and I said, "Don't worry, I've got your back." And I stood in the hallway with a laser knife and telepathically told the ET crew to stay the fuck out of my way because I was killing anything that came up the hall. And proceeded to do that. And the rest of the crew is now absolutely terrified of me.
I would imagine.
Well, they were... And so I had to kill this guy. And, basically, I shoved my thumbs through his eye sockets.
Would have been easier to just slit his throat.
Probably.
I'm sorry. This is what I'm trained to do in space. It would have been easier to just slit his throat.
Have you ever had to toss anybody out of an airlock?
Yes, twice.
There are times when I've been tempted.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a lot of paperwork. I gotta tell you that much. You can't just do it.
Wow.
That's probably why he had an opening on his ship for me. Was because the prior one had to be tossed.
Had to be physically removed.
Yes.
Yeah, but I mean, you got to remember, it's not something that's done without a lot of forethought. It's to get rid of a person who has been recruited into the German colonies. You have to justify it to the powers that be in a big kind of way.
He said Nickelback wasn't that bad
in that individual.
Yeah, I would imagine they must spend quite a bit
I
of
like Nickelback, and I will say it flat out. Now, the problem is you've got a society where everybody has to pull. You have a society where everybody has to pull their weight.
Right.
And if you've got somebody that won't pull their weight, no matter what, and they're just a jackass that causes trouble all the time, okay, you have to take their attitude and their abilities in one hand and the amount of time and trouble that's been taken to train them. And at what point does a sucky attitude outweigh what's invested in them?
Right.
Yep.
So
right. That's it's
the way it is.
Not something you can just do. You got to justify it, and when you get back, you've got to explain to your superiors why you did it. It's not just kind of like, oh, I executed this pitiful slave. It's not like that.
It's like a court-martial where you have to justify your actions. So it's not somebody that is just niche. It's somebody that is just constantly in your face and subversive and undermining your authority and making life on the ship difficult for everybody.
An oxygen thief would be accurate.
You don't want a mutineer on a ship, and that's most of them that are tossed are mutineers.
Makes sense.
I would get tossed quick as fuck.
Yeah, I probably would too.
I'd be like, what? I'm bugging on that shit.
No, people like that are like, you just leave them in a colony. Oops, we forgot. And they get put into slavery. But somebody that is just a total pain in the ass and constantly in your face and is an oxygen thief, they get put out the airlock.
So we'd probably last, 20 minutes?
You'd probably get left in a colony.
Mm-hmm. We had one other question.
Actually, I got 3 other questions besides the one other question you got. But we're getting low on time, so we're going to have to try and blast through this. But I do want to get...
okay.
you guys back on at another time, maybe we could do a pre-recorded thing, so time isn't really an issue.
Or maybe a weekend cast.
Or whatever. We'll figure it out. But Dan, go ahead and start with your question first.
It's when they first like pick you out for service, right? When they first identify you as a candidate for a 20 and back, and they initially take your consciousness from your natural body. How do they do that? Do they use technology? Is it magic? Is it psionics? How does that happen?
Okay, that's many questions, but Penny, it's with me that they didn't take my consciousness out of my body. They took my body.
No. With Cael, they take him. With me, they take me to a Kruger station, and they put me in one tank, and I believe the gel in that is yellow, and they have a clone in another tank with, I believe it's green, and it looks like the apparatus from The Fly in between. And the tech is a combination of things from the Draco and the Mantids. And they use the code word to pull up that altar so it's dominant, and it just goes through the wires electronically. It's technological, and it's like what they're trying to do with the singularity on Earth.
They use a magnetic containment system to hold and siphon around souls.
Yeah, it's a magnetic system, and there's wires that you can see, but it takes you from one body and puts you in the other one, and then they just sort of hold your body in that yellow stuff. They just wheel it away and bring another one in for the next person, and they keep your natural body in that while you're serving in the clone. And then when it's all done, they pop you back into where they took you from, because they have all the coordinates from when they took you. They just dial it back, and there it put you back, and you're like, what happened? What they've been doing to me lately is it's nights that I don't dream, because they've erased most of the memory, but because it's still this quantum connection, because it's the same soul, I will wake up in her, because she's still going. And so with the quantum connection, we have a psychic link. And so I will wake up in her as things are going. So that's why I have the moments in time. It's not a strong enough link to know all the time what's going on, but it's strong enough that it's like, huh? Where am I? Oh, okay, I'm Starbuck right now.
Yeah, it does get complicated, because you see, the thing is that when, like with me, when they come to pick me up, then you see, the thing is that you can be active. You can do like a month's service or 3 months service or something like that. Then they bring you back to the point at which they pick you up and drop you off again. You know, which is all well and good, because nobody notices you're missing or anything like that. But the thing is that your soul, what people call a soul, while you've got two copies of yourself essentially operating in the same space at the same time, your soul's essentially operating two bodies simultaneously. And that's, you notice the difference. And I can sometimes get an idea of how long I was active for. It is, yeah. And you can notice how long you've been active for, how long that particular term of service was, or that, period was suddenly I'll notice, I'll realize, like I'm fully back again. It's suddenly things get a lot easier back here,
And part of how you'll know how long, with Cael, his fingernails will grow a quarter inch overnight.
Yep. Yeah. I thought that was normal when I was growing up, man. Like, I was talking, I only found it out like a few years back when I was talking to a beautician, or I think it was my hairdresser or something. And I said, oh yeah, because, fingernails, they grow, like they don't really grow much, and then they'll grow like a millimeters overnight. And she says, no. In fact, fingernails grow so steady you can actually measure time by it almost. And I was like, oh, and I looked it up and she was right. So then I suddenly realized what the hell was going on with my fingernails, that sometimes I would wake up and I would have all this growth that wasn't there because I just cut them like a day or two beforehand. And that was, now I actually use that as a way to tell whether or not I've gone or not. Because you see the regeneration chamber regenerates all of your living tissue, but your nails, your fingernails and your hair is dead. It doesn't affect it. So your fingernails, they can, they can return you back to the point at which you originally checked in when you went on your service. So any scars or injuries or anything like that you got when you're up there, go. It's all living tissue. But your fingernails are dead, and the regeneration chamber doesn't affect them. So I've actually noticed that in my fingernails, you can actually see when I was active by the lines of the lines in my nails, the white spots that I get when I'm active. I've since found out that apparently that those white spots are caused by liver stress, apparently. And it seems when I'm up there, the chemicals and stuff they give you put your liver under a lot of stress. Mm-hmm. So I'm actually starting to be able to track approximately how long I'm gone for, and how long it was between turns by that.
Who knew fingernails?
Yeah.
Well, listen, guys.
Check out your fingernails.
We really got a jet.
We've got 20 minutes over.
Yeah, these guys need to get out of here. But I want to thank you for coming on and coming forward with your story. We got to definitely get you back on. Thank you. Definitely got to get you back on at some point, or maybe even do a pre-recorded thing. I don't know. We'll work it out. But you're coming back on whether you like it or not, Major Cael.
All right. We'll see what we can do.
All right. Well,
maybe next time the Skype work.
Yeah, we'll get the Skype working right.
It's been my pleasure.
And you too, Penny.
And can I finish up? Can I just say to everybody out there, there's a whole lot of people out there who are going through the same stuff I am, who are doing this stuff. And, hang in there. I don't think it's that much longer until this stuff is really going to come to the surface. And you're not going to have to be embarrassed about it anymore. You're not going to have to be worried about it anymore. And perhaps we might even get recognized for it, So instead of being shameful, maybe one day it might be something we can be proud of.
Well, I hope that day comes sooner rather than later.
Me too.
For all you guys. And Penny, once again, it's been a pleasure as always. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for coming, Penny.
You're welcome, all of you.
She makes a great wingman.
Yes, she does. All right, guys. Well, thanks for watching, and we will be back next week. I think Tomas is coming on next week. We're doing a tech special or something like that.
Nice. So yeah, that'll be good times. Be sure to be here. Same bad time, same bad channel.
Mm-hmm. And we will see you next week. Work.
Bye.
Bye.
I'd save the heartache for
thousand ways, the brightest light was beneath the